This year is number 7 in the series on Yemos HaMoshiach, and it's really a sequel of the last year, which was on Golus Esav and the Erev Rav, in particular Amalek. This week we're going to look at the response, how a person should react to the nature of Esav, in particular Amalek, and the Erev Rav as a response in Avodas HaKodesh to react to this form of Golus. I suppose at the beginning we should mention that a response is necessary. One can't imagine that I'm okay in my home, I'm all right Jack, and anything or the world that goes on around me has nothing to do with me, and so long as I'm fine in my home and the paycheck comes in and the cholent is on the table on Shabbos, that's not the reaction. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh. Lo yaleinu, we see in this period of Golus Yishmael as well, there are many orphans, many Yisomim, many Almonas, people who are hurt in Piguim, and the tragedies which have occurred in each Golus. The heart of a Jew is with his nation, with the people, with the suffering that goes on. And that's why this year is so important and significant as a reaction to the nature of what's happening with Amalek in particular and the Erev Rav. Rabbi Yehonason Alpren, in the Sefer Kovetz Ma'amorim, and in particular in an essay called Ma'asai L'Melech, Omer Ani Ma'asai L'Melech, Rabbi Yehonason explains that the two Yom Tovim of Chanukah and Purim, the reaction of Klal Yisrael to those two periods of Golus, meaning the Golus of the exile of Greece and also of Shushan, of Persia, were quite different. We see that in Greece the Hashmonaim went out and fought and made a battle, and yet by Purim there was no attempt, as far as we know, of assassinating Haman or fighting his family or those who represented Haman. Why is there such a difference and a discrepancy in the response? And Rabbi Yehonason explains that the Golus, the exile, the persecution by Chanukah was lahashkicham toirasecha ulahaviram mechukei retzanecha, to remove them from any connection, any spiritual connection at all. And therefore they fought against that. In the words of Rabbi Yehonason, who quotes the Levush, that's called a Maisa Soton, an act of the Soton against the Torah, against the yeshivas, against the shuls, against the Shulchan Aruch. For that you go out and fought, and that's what they did, the Hashmonaim, and it's called a Maisa Soton. In Purim, the decree was lahashmid laharog la'abed es kol hayuhudim, and because it was an annihilation against the people, but not against the religion, for that, says the Levush, and Rabbi Yehonason quotes, that was called a Maisa Hashem, against the people, and the reaction and the response was tshuva and tefillah and tanis, tzoim ba'efer, tzoim ba'hesped, tzak ba'efer, liyufol rabim. That's what Mordechai told them. No fighting. And in reality, if we see that the people in Shushan were far greater and far numerous than they were in exile of Golus Yovan, and yet they didn't fight back. So we see the response needs what's called Das Torah. One has to know how to react and respond to each period of Golus. We saw a few weeks ago on the Golus of Yishmael, where we learnt through Perek Kuf Kof Dalet, Perek 124 in Tehillim, and there at the end, David HaMelech explains, Ezreinu b'shem Hashem, oisei shamayim va'oretz. Said Rab Chaim Vital, in the name of the Arizal, that our hope is b'shem Hashem, that is the avodah of prayer, of tefillah, and chukos shamayim va'oretz. Oisei shamayim va'oretz refers to the statutes, meaning of Torah. And therefore, the response of each Golus is quite different. We see by the Greek culture, in particular, one has to be careful not being too much involved with the secular culture of art and music and sport and theatre, which is Greek in essence, or from Yishmael, the response, of course, we have to protect ourselves. Of course, it's necessary to prevent any sort of terrorist attack of Yishmael, of the Arab countries, but in reality, the main essence, the main thrust, is one of a prayer of Ezreinu b'Shem Hashem Oisei Shamayim v'Oretz. What's with Amalek? How does one react against Amalek? And as we saw last week, the Vilna Gaon in Even Shlema brings down that the Erev Rav, those almost saboteur segments of Klal Yisrael who are not practicing Jews in any respect, the Erev Rav, who are Balei Machlokes, Balei Lashon Hara, Balei Kavod, chameleons who are by no means sincere in what they say, what they mean. For these people, we have to have the right response. How does one react to such a golus? The answer, at first glance, must of course match the nature of the golus. We must look again, as we mentioned last week in review for a few minutes, how come there is an Amalek on the scene. Where did he come from? And we explained that after all the miracles of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and when the Jewish nation arrived at the Yam Suf, and the miracles of Kriyas Yam Suf, and the Anani HaKavod, and the Mon, and yet afterwards, when there was no water at Rafidim, Perek Yud Zayin in Shemais, Klal Yisrael said, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu. Is Hashem there? You can't ask that question. After all that's happened, Rashi brings the mashal of a son sitting on his father's lap, and everything that the son asks for, the father passes him, and yet the son then turns around and says, have you seen my father? And the father puts the son down and says, let the dog come and bite him. Don't you see who it is? I'm the one who's looking after you. Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu is an awful response. It's a response which in the next pasuk says, Vayava Amalek. Amalek turned on the scene. They had no axe to grind, they had no agenda, it was just purely lahachis, to remove the influence and the impact of Kavod Shamayim, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. And that's, we see throughout the generations. We explained last week from the Gemara in Megillah that Amalek, who was represented by Haman, Agagi, who was an Agagi, the reason why he came, the Gemara from Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, when he said it's because they bowed down to the pesel, to the idol in the time of Nebuchadnezzar. That's a desertion. That's reneging on the connection bein Adam laMokom, and for that along came Haman. Gemara in Megillah, Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. And we suggested also that perhaps after the tragic circumstances of the reform movement in Germany, when clearly they had left the derech of Avodas Hashem, they had left HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they turned away, and also the founding of the state, where there was very little connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, recognition of where the state had come from in Eretz Yisrael in 1948. The whole complaint of the Or Sameach and the Brisker Rov, that when they wrote in the Declaration of Independence, Tzur Yisrael the Go'aloi, they did not mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they meant Tzahal, they meant the Israeli army and the Israeli forces, but not Hashem, and he was removed from the scene, perhaps, I don't know, but before that, in the Balfour Declaration, where clearly in the Balfour Declaration it was a gift, says the Or Sameach from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they had left the derech of Hashem, and therefore perhaps that's the reason for a later day Haman, a Hitler who came on the scene. Of course, the state was later, but there was a symptom of the Erev Rav, of Amalekim, of leaving the derech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and choosing instead a secular way of life, which brought, like in the Midbar, like in Shushan, the same approach of Amalek as the response. That's the nature and the fiber of Golus Amalek. What's the response? The Ramban in Bereshis, on 3 different occasions, explains that when Avram, Yitzchak and Yaakov in Parshas Lech Lecha, Parshas Toldos and Parshas Vayechi, each of the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak and Yaakov, were forced into exile. And the Ramban explains in Perek Yud Beis in Parshas Lech Lecha that when Avraham Avinu went down to Mitzrayim, it was a forerunner of the future Golus in Mitzrayim. Meaning that everything that happened there, Paro tried to take Sarah as a wife, the way Paro was smitten by a plague in his house and in his household, and in later Avraham Avinu left B'Rechush Gadol with Kesef and Zov, with great wealth. That was a Maisa Avos Siman Labonim of the time that the Jewish nation went down to Mitzrayim, and the reason why they went down was because, like Avraham Avinu went down for a famine, so also Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim because of the famine. There was no food to eat. Just like Paro had meant to take the wives, so also the Egyptians and the Egyptian Golus, that the reason why they killed the boys was to take the women for themselves. Paro was smitten in the time of Avram, says the Ramban, and similarly we see that the 10 plagues in Mitzrayim, and eventually they left with Rechush Gadol, with great possessions. Avram going down to Mitzrayim was a forerunner of Golus Mitzrayim. In Parshas Toldos, the Ramban explains that when Yitzchak, he didn't leave Eretz Yisrael, he was not allowed to, but he went to Plishtim, and when he stayed there by Avimelech in Plishtim, it wasn't a persecution in exile, it was just in a strange land, in a different area, and again, it was because of the famine that he left, that he went down to Eretz, to Plishtim, and he came back afterwards with great honor and made a covenant with Avimelech and was able to come back. Says the Ramban, similarly we see that in Golus Bovel, that the Jewish nation left Eretz Yisrael and they were forced to live in Bovel, but it wasn't a servitude, it wasn't a persecution. They became Sarim, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Talmud Bavli came out from there, and then they made a bris later to come back and build Bayis Sheni, like Yitzchak had made a bris with Avimelech. The final Golus, of Golus Yaakov down to Mitzrayim, says the Ramban in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi, is a forerunner of Golus Edom, which we're still living under. Golus Yishmael is a tail end, a sequel to Golus Esav. But we see, says the Ramban in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi, that nearly all the terms that occurred when Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim, he went down because of a famine. Similarly, in Golus Edom, they had to leave by Rome in the time of Bayis Sheni. There was no food in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim. The problems that they endured, Yaakov Avinu, he never meant to stay there for a long time. He just went there for a short time. Similarly, Golus Edom we didn't think it would be for such a long time. Yaakov died in Mitzrayim, says the Ramban. So it is that the Jewish nation feel as if they have dried up, almost died in Golus Edom. But later, in Golus Mitzrayim, we see that Yaakov Avinu was brought out with great honor and great avel. There was tremendous mourning when Yaakov died and was brought back to Eretz Yisrael. Says the Ramban, that is the sign of L'osid Lova B'mheira V'yomeinu, the enormous mourning and depression which will take over by the other nations of the world when they realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes back and redeems forever by Shlishi, by the Geula Shlema B'mheira V'yomeinu. Now the Ramban explains, and Rabbeinu Bachai also brings out, that when Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim, he believed that after that would be the Geula Shlema. There wasn't to be another Golus. The Zohar brings down that when Yosef saw the brothers, V'lo yochol lehisapek, he couldn't hold back, and immediately Yosef revealed himself to the brothers. But if he would have been misapek, if he would have held on and brought Yaakov back down to Mitzrayim, and then Yaakov would have bowed down to him, which was actually the original dream which he had seen, then that would have been the Geula Shlema immediately after Mitzrayim. The Zohar in Parshas Pinchas brings down that a wise old non-Jew once came and lambasted Rabbi Eliezer and screamed at him and said, nowhere do we ever see that there's a Bayis Shlishi. And Rabbi Eliezer then later asked Eliyahu Hanavi, and Eliyahu Hanavi asked from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, famous medrash in Zohar in Parshas Pinchas, as what's to be? Was there a Bayis Shlishi? There's no reference for it. And Eliyahu Hanavi reported back from Shamayim, back to Rabbi Eliezer, and told him that in reality, from leaving Mitzrayim, they were supposed to be in the Geula Shlema at that point. Only because of Chet HaEgel and the Meraglim was it stopped. And we're still paying the price for that. If that's the case, if the intention of Yaakov going down to Mitzrayim was to be the final Geula, then there is a code of practice, a certain blueprint which we must pick up from when Yaakov in Perek Memvav, when he went down to Mitzrayim in Parshas Vayigash, and we can see there a certain code of survival, of how the Jewish nation is supposed to survive in Golus Amalek and Erev Rav, which is Edom. The family came down, but before they arrived, in Perek Memvav Pasuk Kaf Ches, Ve'ez Yehuda shalach lefonav el Yosef lahoires lefonav Goishna. Yehuda was sent ahead in order to found, says Rashi, a Beis HaMedrash, a place where they would learn Torah. And therefore we see, if we're going to understand that Yaakov's going down to Mitzrayim was the forerunner of the final Golus, we see that the survival of the Jewish nation in Golus is dependent on there being a Beis HaMedrash, a Mokum Torah. Go back in history to the times of Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, all the periods of all the Golus, of all the different exile of the yeshivas in Europe. Take just the last 100 years. We could have gone through the whole period of the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim, the Shlach HaKodesh when he came, the Ramban when he came, the Moshe Galanta, the Yaakov Chagiz, when all these great Rabbanim, they all came, and the first thing they did, Rabbi Yehuda HaChosid, was to find a shul and to find a Beis HaMedrash. The survival of Klal Yisrael, if we understand the role of Yaakov, what he's setting up by sending Yehuda first, is to present and build, first of all, a Beis HaMedrash, which will be a Mokum of Torah. We see in America, the whole development of America, the Satmar Rebbe, the Bobova Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe in Europe, the Baron Kotler, when he went to Lakewood, always to found a place of a Beis HaMedrash. And because of that, that is the survival of the Jewish nation in Golus Amalek and in Erev Rav. That's the message we pick up from Yaakov when he went down to Mitzrayim. That's the survival. It's dependent, first of all, on Yehuda Lahorais, a Mokum Torah. But secondly, we find that Yaakov Avinu, on the border of Mitzrayim, when he first saw Yosef, he approached Yosef, Yosef cried on his father's shoulder. But Yaakov, says Rashi, Yaakov said Kriyas Shema. Why did he say Kriyas Shema? We see at the end of his life, when all the brothers gathered together, and he wanted to reveal to them the Acharis Hayomim, Yaakov Avinu immediately was concerned that he wasn't able to reveal the Kates, and all the sons said Shema Yisrael. Why Shema Yisrael? What is there in Shema Yisrael which is so significant, and we're using it now as a blueprint for the future reaction, for our reaction in Golus of Amalek and for the future Geula of Klal Yisrael? What is there in Shema Yisrael? For this, we must understand the Medrash in the Yalkut, in Perek Samach, in Yeshayahu. On the Pasuk, Se'i Saviv Einayich Ure'i, the Medrash brings down, the Yalkut explains the final showdown, the final gathering together of all the nations of the world with Klal Yisrael, and the retribution which is given to the Umas Ha'olam. Says the Medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring together with Eliyahu and Moshiach, and with Shemen in their hands, Makelchem b'yedchem, and the Shechina will go out in front of them, and everyone will gather in Emek Yehoshaphat, next to Har HaBayis, where they have the tomb of Zechariah and Absalom there. And all the nations will gather together there, and Klal Yisrael will come forward, and the Nevi'im will come forward with them, the Shechina in front of them, the Torah on one side, and the Malachi Asharis on the other. It's all here in the description. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will call out, says the Medrash, for all the Elilim, all the idols, and all the different forms of Avodah Zarah, and bring Ruach and Neshama to all of them, pass them over the valley of Gehinnom, and throw them into Gehinnom. And there'll be an enormous retribution to all the Umas HaOlam for their lifetime persecution of the Jewish nation. But then, says the Medrash, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will turn round to Klal Yisrael and say to them, Umi atem, and who are you? And the Klal Yisrael will answer and say, we Amcha v'nachal asecha, we are your people. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu will say to them, Umi me'ed bachem, who will testify that you are actually Am Segula Mikol Ha'amim, you are my people who I chose thousands of years ago. Where's your full identity? And Klal Yisrael will call on Avraham Avinu, and Avraham Avinu will come forward, says the Medrash, and he'll say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'gam es hagoy avodu dona anochi, in the future there will be Klal Yisrael spared from the other nations. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will answer and say, Umi meyid yoiser, it's not enough. And Yitzchak will come forward, and Yitzchak will declare, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I am from Nachal Achosecha, you promised us that there'll be a future for Klal Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Umi meid yoiseh, it's not enough. Eventually Yaakov Avinu will come forward, and he'll say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lo yeh locha Elohim acherim, and this is the nation who worshipped you all the time. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will then wait for the moment when Klal Yisrael will respond, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And that is the eventual beginning of the Geula, where we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will shine His face upon us and bring us to the greatest possible glory and honor as the nation who kept all of the Torah in the difficult periods of Golus. At that time, all the nations will bring an upsurge, says the Medrash, and Gabriel and the Malachim will come forward and say to Klal Yisrael not to worry, and they will be scared. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu will punish us as well. And eventually Paro will come forward, and Paro says, but I also testified about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Said HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Paro, yes, but you never said Shema Yisrael twice a day. The identity and the crucial identity of Klal Yisrael in the time of the Geula Shalema, as a reaction to the final showdown after Golus Amalek and the Erev Rav, is the ability and the recognition and the testimony of every Jew to be able to say Shema Yisrael. It's not a question of being born a Jew. Evidently it's not enough if one has great yichus or any other apparent identity of being Jewish. The identity is based on Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Perhaps it can therefore be suggested that when Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim and entering Egypt as he thought was the last stage of Golus, having realized what Avram and Yitzchak, when they went into Golus by Pelishtim and Egypt, meaning by Egypt and Bovel, this was the final recognition of the Jewish nation. And that's perhaps why Yaakov Avinu, at the time of his death, said, I will reveal to you ba'acharis hayomim, but they haven't even started with Golus Mitzrayim. And the Ramban mentions that, Rabbeinu Bachai brings it out as well. Why did Yaakov Avinu discuss about the acharis hayomim after his death, that would take effect, when in reality they hadn't even started Mitzrayim, because Yaakov understood that this would be the end, this would be the Geula Shalema. And the final Geula will depend on the recognition of every Jew of Shema Yisrael. The testimony, first words in, last words out, every day of one's life. First words maybe a person is taught when they're born, and last words, one takes one's passport into Olam Haba and Gan Eden, is Shema Yisrael. The identity of a Jew is the recognition of Shema Yisrael. These 2 points, the founding and the recognition and the perseverance and the diligence of a Mokum Torah, of setting up a place where people can learn Torah and grow in Torah and mitzvahs and understand what the Torah means. That's what Yaakov Avinu, why he sent Yehuda ahead. That's the forerunner of Golus, the final Golus. And similarly, the ability and the recognition of each Jew to be able to say and declare and testify Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And that is really in a nucleus. We see that's what Yaakov did, and then he settled in Mitzrayim. But these are the 2 points of survival. But we mentioned in the Shir on Amalek and Erev Rav, there's another side to Amalek. In the Gemara in Brochas, Daf Yud Zayin, when the Gemara explained that Rabbi Alexandria, at the end of his prayer of Shemona Esrei, he prayed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we want so much to be able to keep your Torah, but we're not able to. Umima Akev, we explained that there was something called Shibud Malchius, which is the persecution and the decrees of Amalek, but there's something called Seir Sheba Isa, the yeast in the dough. And we explained that's the nature of pride, of arrogance, that it lifts a person up from what he really is. It takes him out of reality due to his pride and his arrogance. And therefore, that is the second symptom which we must react to of Golus Amalek and the Erev Rav. They are, by nature, the Erev Rav, people who live in Klal Yisrael, and they're part of Klal Yisrael, but their behavior is they're Bali Machlokes, Bali Taiva, people who search for money and honor and pride, and really have no sincerity in their connection bein Adam Lamokum with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the reaction needed to such a feature of in Klal Yisrael? This time it's inside. If you mentioned, we mentioned it's the subin next to the chita, the bran next to the wheat. There's chaff and the straw, as we mentioned from the Vilna Gaon in Even Shlema, but the subin, which represents the Erev Rav, is right next to the wheat. But it's psoiles, it's not the real wheat. And that's the Erev Rav, who are so tightly connected and intimately involved in Klal Yisrael, in the people themselves. Once again, we must go back to Mitzrayim and look and understand that there wasn't just the Yaakov who went down, there was the behavior of Yosef in Mitzrayim. His conduct and his method of behavior inside Mitzrayim was in Mitzrayim a forerunner of the way the Jewish nation should behave. The Gemara in Yevamos Daf Ayin Tes Amud Aleph brings out that there were 3 significant symptoms and characteristics which you can depict in a Jew: Rachmonim, Baishonim, and Goimlei Chasodim. They are merciful, they are compassionate. Baishonim, they are shy, they are embarrassed. And Goimlei Chasodim, they are kind. The epitome of these 3 was Yosef inside Mitzrayim. We see every time that he had to confront his brothers, Yosef stood aside and went in the corner and cried and came back again. In reality, his nature was full of compassion, but he had to fulfill the dreams, and that's why he carried on in this determined way in order to make sure that the brothers would bow down to him and bring down Binyamin, and then he would reveal himself as what happened. But in essence, he was a compassionate person, a rachamon. His baishon, his embarrassment, as we see when he was confronted by the wife of Potiphar, and she tried to entice him, and he turned around and said, "V'chotasi lelokim." Rabbeinu Yonah explained that the real meaning of busha is busha lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not in front of other people, not being laughed at or scorned by other people. That's just a person might become embarrassed. But busha in the context of a Jew means busha lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Yosef was incapable of going ahead with the wife of Potiphar because he was embarrassed. Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who amed lifnei Hashem. That's Baishonas. And Goimlei Chasodim is when he turned around and said to his brothers, Ki lemichya shalachani Elokim. I'm here in order to support you. I'm here to help you. Even all that they had done to him, and the great trials that he went through in Egypt, all because of the brothers. In essence, he was the epitome of kindness, and he helped them and supported them and looked after them in Goshen. Yosef is the protagonist which we look for as the antidote and the reaction against the Erev Rav. The method of survival is Yaakov by the Beis HaMedrash of Torah and Kriyas Shema. That's why he insisted on entering Egypt. He said Kriyas Shema because of this Medrash, as we saw in the Yalkut of the La'asid Lovai. These are the features which make up the reaction and the response to Amalek and the Erev Rav. The drive and the enthusiasm and the perseverance to grow all of one's life as much as one can and to make a life of Torah. Esek HaTorah. That's why we say in the morning, La'asoik b'divrei Torah. Learning Torah is unlike any other mitzvah like Tefillin or Mezuzah or Tzitzis. That's a mitzvah which happens at a certain time. But Torah requires a whole lifetime of dedication, of growing. And that's why Yaakov sent Yehuda ahead to make a Mokum Torah, because that was the survival in the final Golus. That's the first point. And the second is, twice we see Yaakov, when he entered Mitzrayim, he said Kriyas Shema, and the sons responded with Kriyas Shema. It said that Rav Shach, the great Rosh Yeshiva from Ponevezh, many times almost cried and said how many children there are in Eretz Yisrael who don't even know Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is the real identity of a Jew. A bris milah, born a Jew, of course, those are mitzvahs which performs, but at the end of days, the identity will depend on when Yaakov Avinu will declare at the Emek Yehoshaphat, at the valley of Yehoshaphat, and the din will come out, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Mi atem, and who are you? Who are you? Shema Yisrael is the reaction to that. And the reaction in the Erev Rav, the response, comes from Yosef, also in Mitzrayim, the Rachmanas, the Baishanas, and the Goyimei Chasodim, the compassion, the shyness, the embarrassment in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and also the kindness. These are the two, both in Mitzrayim, which was supposed to be the last of all Golas. Avram was from Mitzrayim, Yitzchak represented Bavel, and says the Ramban, Yaakov was the Semel La'avos, was the Siman La'avos for Golas Edom, which says the Ramban in the beginning of Parshas Vayechi is the Golas which we're still living in, together with Golas Yishmael. These are the features of the response which we must bring out in this Golas Yishmael, and which we must develop for ourselves in order to be Zoicha, to be there at the time, to be able to see the Gula Shalema and Binyan Beis HaMikdash, B'mheir v'yameinu. Amen.